The
Wait, what
night
are you
my
doing
daughter
here?
threw me out of my own house,
We're moving in,
it
Mama.
was
We have
raining
to
hard
hurry.
enough to wash the streetlights into long golden tears.
We need you out of the house now.
Emily stood in my doorway beside her
How
husband
could you
Ryan,
do this to
while
me?
my 2 suitcases sat on the porch like forgotten trash.
I am the legal owner of this property now,
Mom,
and that is final.
David,
she said,
please don't
avoiding
do
my
this.
eyes.
You can't just kick
Ryan
us
and
out.
I need this house now. You'd be happier somewhere smaller. I looked past her into the living room that my late husband and I had built together 40 years earlier. My photographs were gone. My favorite chair had disappeared. As I bent to pick up the only box I was allowed to take, a folded document slipped out. One sentence written by my husband years before stopped my breathing. And in that moment, I realized my daughter had made the biggest mistake of her life. Before I tell you what that sentence said, I'd love to hear where you're watching from tonight. Please leave your city and current time in the comments. If this story touches your heart, share your thoughts with me. Your kindness and experiences mean more than you know. And if you'd like to stay with me through the rest of this journey, don't forget to like and subscribe. Sometimes strangers understand our pain better than family does. My name is Nguyen, and until 3 months ago, I believed I had done everything a mother was supposed to do. I spent 40 years loving one man, raising one daughter, and building one home. That house sat on a quiet street in Portland, Oregon, beneath 3 old maple trees that my husband Michael planted when Emily was 10 years old. Every autumn, the leaves covered our front yard in shades of gold and red. Michael used to joke that even the trees were trying to impress me. He had a way of making ordinary things feel special. Michael and I met in 1980 at a community college accounting class. I was 21 and working nights at a grocery store. He was studying engineering while repairing air conditioners during the day. Neither of us had money. Our first apartment had a leaking ceiling. Our first car barely started. Our honeymoon consisted of 2 nights at a cheap motel outside Seattle. But we were happy, very happy. For nearly 4 decades, we built our life, one paycheck at a time. Michael eventually became a construction engineer, and I worked as an accountant for a local manufacturing company. We saved every dollar we could. When Emily was born, Michael cried harder than I did. He adored our daughter. Every Saturday morning, he made pancakes shaped like animals. Every school play, every soccer game, every birthday party, he never missed one. Even when he worked 60 hours a week, Emily was the center of his world. Sometimes, I think that's why losing him nearly destroyed me. Michael died 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis came quickly, and the disease moved even faster. 1 month we were discussing retirement trips to Alaska, and 6 months later, I was sitting beside his hospital bed listening to the machines breathe for him. His last words to me were simple. Take care of yourself now. At the time, I didn't understand why he said it that way. Not take care of Emily. Not take care of the house. Not take care of our family. Just me. Take care of yourself. For the first 2 years after his death, I barely functioned. The house felt enormous. I would wake up reaching for him in bed and remember he was gone. The silence became its own kind of pain. I kept his coffee mug in the cabinet exactly where he left it. His gardening gloves remained in the garage. His jacket still hung beside the front door. Emily visited often during those early months. She brought groceries. She helped me pay bills online. She took me to doctor's appointments. I remember feeling grateful that Michael had been right about her. He used to say, "When we're old, Emily will always look after you." At the time, I believed him. But slowly things changed. Emily became busier. Her visits became shorter. The phone calls became less frequent. When she did call, the conversations felt different. "Mom, have you thought about selling the house?" "Mom, do you really need all those rooms?" "Mom, Portland real estate is worth a fortune now." At first, I didn't think much about it. Many people downsize after retirement. Many widows move into smaller homes. but something in her voice always made me uncomfortable. One afternoon, she sat across from me at my kitchen table while drinking coffee. "You know, Mom, that house has to be worth nearly $1 million now." I laughed. "I don't plan on going anywhere." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You don't have to stay here forever. I promised your father I would." She stared down at her cup. "Dad's gone." The words landed harder than she intended, or perhaps exactly as she intended. After that conversation, I noticed small things. She began asking questions about bank accounts. She asked whether Michael had life insurance. She asked where important documents were stored. She asked whether I had a will. Sometimes her questions came so quickly that I felt as if I were being interviewed. One evening, she asked, "Who inherits the house?" I looked at her. "Why are you asking?" She shrugged. "I'm just thinking ahead." I smiled and changed the subject, but something cold settled inside me. A mother knows when something is wrong with her child, but sometimes she refuses to admit it. Emily worked as a real estate agent. The housing market had slowed, and commissions had become unpredictable. Her husband Ryan had changed jobs twice in 3 years. They always seemed to be chasing something bigger, a larger house, a newer SUV, expensive vacations, designer furniture. Meanwhile, Michael and I had spent decades learning how to live within our means. Sometimes Emily laughed about that. "You and Dad always worried too much about money." Maybe we did, but we never owed anyone. We never lost sleep over debt, and we never measured people by what they owned. After Michael died, I joined a church group for widows. I volunteered twice a week at the local library. I learned gardening. I started baking again. Karen Ellis, my neighbor across the street, became one of my closest friends. Karen was widowed too. Every Friday evening, we sat on my back porch drinking tea. One afternoon, she asked me, "How's Emily doing?" I hesitated. "Busy." Karen studied my face. "That's not what I asked." I looked down at my hands. "I don't know." Karen nodded slowly. "I've noticed she doesn't look at you when she talks anymore." The comment surprised me. "What do you mean?" "She talks at you, not to you." I wanted to defend my daughter. I truly did, but I couldn't, because I had noticed it too. Emily seemed impatient whenever I spoke about Michael. She rolled her eyes when I talked about old memories. She acted as if my life had become an inconvenience, as if grief had an expiration date, as if growing older made me less important. One rainy afternoon, I climbed into the attic searching for Christmas decorations. Instead, I found an old photo album. There was Emily at age 6 sitting on Michael's shoulders. Emily at 13 holding her first violin. Emily at 18 crying during her graduation. And one photograph stopped me. Michael stood beside our house with his arm around me while Emily stood between us. Written on the back in Michael's handwriting were the words, "Our greatest achievement." I sat on the attic floor and cried, because somewhere along the way my daughter had stopped seeing me as her mother, and I had started becoming simply the old woman who lived inside a valuable house. I didn't know then that much worse was coming. I didn't know that my daughter and her husband would soon arrive at my front door, asking for help. And like every mother who still believes love can fix anything, I would open that door. The first time Emily cried in my kitchen after her marriage began falling apart, I forgot every uncomfortable conversation we had ever shared. That is what mothers do. We remember our children at 6 years old, not 42. It was a Thursday afternoon in early March when she arrived unexpectedly. Rain covered her windshield and her mascara had run down her cheeks. She looked exhausted. When I opened the front door, she immediately wrapped her arms around me. "Mom, I don't know what we're going to do." My heart broke before she said another word. I sat her at the kitchen table while I made tea. The same blue ceramic cups Michael and I had used for years sat between us. Emily stared into hers. Ryan lost another client. I frowned. I thought his business was improving. She shook her head. It isn't. She explained that Ryan's consulting work had slowed dramatically. Bills had piled up. Credit card debt had increased. Their mortgage payments were late. We might lose the house. I reached across the table and held her hand. Oh, sweetheart. Her eyes filled with tears. We've been trying to fix everything ourselves. The old instinct returned immediately. Protect her. Help her. Save her. It was the same feeling I had when she was 8 years old and fell from her bicycle. The same feeling I had when she called me from college after her first heartbreak. No matter how old our children become, a mother's heart never updates itself. It remains permanently attached to the child they once were. How can I help? I asked. Emily hesitated. Ryan and I were wondering if we could stay here for a few weeks. The room became quiet. She quickly added, just until we figure things out. I looked around the kitchen. Michael's favorite clock still hung above the stove. His reading glasses remained on the shelf near the window. This house had been quiet for years. Perhaps too quiet. Of course, I said. Emily began crying again. Thank you, Mom. That evening, she brought Ryan over. Ryan Carter had always been difficult for me to understand. He was charming when he wanted something and distant when he didn't. He spoke confidently about business opportunities, investments, and future plans, but somehow those plans never seemed to succeed. Still, he hugged me warmly. Alexa, you've saved us. I smiled. Family helps family. He nodded. We'll only need a few weeks. A few weeks. Those words would repeat themselves in my mind many times later. The following Saturday, they arrived with a moving truck. I expected a few suitcases, perhaps several boxes. Instead, an entire truck backed into my driveway. Furniture, televisions, storage bins, kitchen appliances, exercise equipment, boxes stacked from floor to ceiling. I stood beside Karen, who had walked over from across the street. Karen raised an eyebrow. That's a lot for a few weeks. I laughed nervously. I'm sure they'll sort through it. But even then, something felt wrong. Ryan directed the movers as if he owned the property. This goes upstairs. Put that in the garage. Move those boxes. Several times, he referred to the house as our place. At first, I assumed he simply felt grateful. Emily seemed happier than she had in months. She cooked dinner that evening, and all three of us sat together at the dining table. For the first time in years, the house felt alive. I told myself this was a blessing. I told myself Michael would be happy. The first week passed peacefully. Ryan cleaned the gutters. Emily organized the pantry. We watched television together in the evenings. But slowly, small things began to change. One morning, I walked into the garage and discovered that several shelves containing Michael's tools had been emptied. Ryan looked up from a workbench. I needed more space. Those were Michael's things. He smiled. I'm organizing everything. I said nothing. A few days later, Emily entered my bedroom carrying measuring tape. What are you doing? I asked. We're checking furniture sizes. For what? She looked uncomfortable. The guest room is pretty small. I laughed. Well, yes. Ryan appeared behind her. The master bedroom has a lot more room. I stared at him. He smiled. We're just talking. But the conversation stayed with me. Several days later, I found Emily standing in my living room looking at real estate websites on her tablet. "What are you doing?" She looked up. "Just browsing. 4 houses. 4 condos." I sat beside her. "For you and Ryan." She hesitated. "Actually, for you." I blinked. "What?" She quickly smiled. "Mom, eventually you might want somewhere smaller." "I'm perfectly happy here." She looked away. "I know." The conversation ended there, but something inside me tightened. Karen noticed it too. During our Friday tea, she asked, "How long are they staying?" "I don't know." She looked toward my house. "They seem very comfortable." "They've been through a lot." Karen stirred her tea. "So have you." I didn't answer. The following weekend, Emily invited me to lunch. At a restaurant downtown, she spoke carefully. "Mom, have you ever thought about retirement communities?" I laughed. "I'm retired." "You know what I mean." I put down my fork. "No," she sighed. "They have activities and medical services." "I'm healthy." "You're 67. The number sounded different coming from her. Older, smaller, more fragile. "My mother lived alone until she was 89. Emily looked frustrated. "This isn't about Grandma." "No," I said quietly. "It's about the house." Her face changed. "What?" "You've asked about it for years." She stared at her water glass. "I worry about you." I wanted to believe her. I truly did. But mothers can hear truth hiding underneath words. When we returned home, I walked through every room. Ryan's clothes filled the laundry room. Their food filled the refrigerator. Their shoes lined the hallway. Their television played loudly in the evenings. And suddenly, I realized something. I was beginning to feel like a guest. One evening, I stood outside Michael's old study. Ryan had moved his laptop onto the desk. His papers covered the surface. Michael's chair sat beneath him. He looked up. "Need something?" I glanced at the photographs still hanging on the wall. "No." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked downstairs around midnight and found Emily sitting alone in the kitchen. She looked startled. "What are you doing up?" I couldn't sleep. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then she said quietly, "Dad never wanted you to be alone." I smiled sadly. "No, he didn't." She looked directly at me. "Maybe this house was meant to stay with family." The sentence sounded innocent, but something about it frightened me. Because for the first time, I realized that Emily might no longer see herself as a guest, and perhaps in her mind, I already was. The first thing Ryan changed was the garage door code. I discovered it one Tuesday morning when I returned from grocery shopping. The keypad flashed red. I entered the numbers again. Nothing. Ryan opened the garage from inside and smiled. "Oh, I changed it yesterday." I stood there holding 2 grocery bags. "You changed it?" "Yeah, the old code was easy to guess." He said it casually, as if replacing access to my own home required no discussion. "What's the new number?" "Oh, right," he laughed. "I forgot to tell you." He punched the numbers into the keypad while shielding the buttons with his hand. "You're all set." I wanted to say something. I wanted to ask why I wasn't allowed to know the code, but instead, I carried my groceries inside and remained quiet. That had become my habit. Quiet. The following weekend, Ryan installed shelves in the garage. Michael's workbench disappeared. His fishing gear moved into cardboard boxes. Several of his tools vanished entirely. When I asked where they were, Ryan answered without looking up. "I put them in storage." "What storage?" "The shed." Michael had built that workbench himself. I ran my fingers across the empty space. For 40 years, his hands had touched that wood. Now it was gone. Emily noticed me standing there. Mom, Ryan's just trying to organize things. I looked at her. Your father built this. She sighed. Dad isn't using it anymore. The words hit me harder than she realized, or perhaps exactly as hard as she intended. That night, I sat in my bedroom holding Michael's photograph. I found myself talking to him. I had started doing that after he died. Sometimes I asked questions, sometimes I complained. Sometimes I simply sat in silence. Things are changing, I whispered. The house felt different now. The sounds were different. The smells were different. Ryan cooked spicy foods that filled the kitchen. Emily played television programs loudly late at night. The laundry room stayed full. The refrigerator no longer contained my favorite foods. Small things, but small things accumulate. One morning, I entered the kitchen and found all of my coffee mugs packed inside a box. Emily stood beside newly purchased dishes. I thought we needed something more modern. I lifted one of my old mugs. The blue ceramic cup Michael bought me during our anniversary trip to Seattle. These aren't old dishes. She folded her arms. Mom, they don't match anything. They match my memories. She looked uncomfortable. You're being emotional. Of course I was emotional. My husband had died. My life had changed. And now my home was disappearing one object at a time. 2 weeks later, Ryan approached me during breakfast. Alexa, we've been thinking. That sentence immediately made me nervous. Emily sat beside him. Ryan continued. The upstairs bedroom would work much better for us. I stared at him. My bedroom? Emily spoke softly. The downstairs guest room is easier for you. I laughed because I thought they were joking. Nobody laughed. You want me to move? Ryan smiled. Temporarily. This is my room. Emily sighed. Mom, we're married adults. And I'm your mother. The room became silent. Ryan leaned back. We're just trying to make things practical. Practical. I had begun to hate that word. Practical meant giving away pieces of my life. Practical meant moving memories into boxes. Practical meant pretending my feelings no longer mattered. I'll think about it, I said, but Emily continued. You hardly used the entire room. My husband died in that room. The words came out before I could stop them. Emily looked away. Ryan stood. We're only trying to help. I remained seated long after they left. Outside, rain tapped against the kitchen windows. Inside, I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my own home. Several days later, Karen came over. She immediately noticed something. Where's your chair? I looked toward the living room. The recliner Michael bought me 15 years earlier had disappeared. Ryan answered from the hallway. We moved it downstairs. Karen frowned. Why? It didn't fit the room. Karen looked directly at me. Did you want it moved? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Ryan answered for me. We all agreed. Karen said nothing until we sat alone on the back porch. Then she asked quietly, Did you agree? No. Why didn't you say so? I stared at my tea. They need help. She shook her head. They need boundaries. I wanted to defend Emily, again, always. But Karen continued. Alexa, when was the last time your daughter asked what you wanted? I couldn't answer, because I honestly couldn't remember. That evening, I walked upstairs and stopped outside the master bedroom. Ryan and Emily were inside. The door was partly open. I heard Ryan speaking. The house is worth at least 900,000. Emily answered quietly. Mom won't leave. She'll have to eventually. There was a pause. Ryan spoke again. She's alone. Emily didn't respond. She doesn't need this much house. Still silence. Then my daughter said something that kept me awake all night. It's only a matter of time. I walked away before hearing more. My legs felt weak. My chest hurt. For the first time in my life, I felt afraid of my own daughter. Not because she would hurt me physically, because she no longer saw me. I had become an obstacle, a problem, a delay. The following week brought another surprise. I returned from the library and discovered movers carrying furniture into the upstairs hallway. What's happening? Ryan smiled. New bedroom furniture. Emily appeared beside him. We got a great deal. I looked at the large king-size bed. Where is this going? Our room. Our room. Not the guest room, not the upstairs room. Their room. My bedroom. I looked at Emily. Did you move my things? She avoided my eyes. We packed them carefully. Where? The downstairs room. My heart began pounding. I climbed the stairs. My photographs were gone. My dresser had disappeared. Michael's side of the closet stood empty. The bed where my husband died had been removed. 40 years. 40 years reduced to boxes. I walked downstairs slowly. Ryan was directing the movers. Emily stood silently beside him. Why? I asked. My daughter finally looked at me. Mom, this makes more sense. I felt tears forming. This was my room. Emily's expression hardened. No, Mom. She paused. This is our home now, too. Those words changed everything. Because for the first time, my daughter wasn't asking permission. She was claiming ownership. And somewhere deep inside me, a terrible realization began to grow. They had never come here to stay for a few weeks. They had come here to stay, and they expected me to disappear. By April, I had stopped calling the house mine. Not because I had given it away, not because I had signed any papers, but because every room reminded me that I no longer belonged there. I began spending more time outside. I visited the library longer than necessary. I sat with Karen on her porch. Sometimes I drove to the cemetery simply to talk to Michael. The house felt crowded, even when only 3 people were inside. Ryan filled every space with noise. Television in the mornings, business podcasts in the afternoons, sports games late into the night. Emily followed him from room to room, agreeing with him, supporting him, defending him. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I became invisible. One Friday evening, Emily announced that several friends would be joining us for dinner. Just a few people, she said. Should I cook? I asked. Ryan answered. We already ordered catering. The dining room table that Michael had built by hand was covered with wine glasses, candles, and expensive dishes. Emily wore a new dress. Ryan opened several bottles of wine. Their guests arrived shortly after 6. There were 2 couples from Emily's real estate office and another couple I had never met. Everyone seemed younger, louder, more successful. I sat quietly at the end of the table. No one intentionally ignored me, but no one included me either. The conversations centered around housing prices, investments, vacation homes, and retirement portfolios. One man asked Ryan, "So, how long have you lived here?" Ryan smiled. "Not long. We're still getting settled." Something inside me tightened. Emily did not correct him. She simply smiled. Later, one of the women turned toward me. "And you are—" Before I could answer, Ryan spoke. "Alexa's Emily's mom. She's staying with us." The room became silent for one terrible second. Staying with us. My fingers tightened around my fork. The woman smiled politely. That's wonderful. I looked directly at Ryan. This is my house. His smile never changed. Of course. But his eyes told a different story. Dinner continued. I barely ate. Several glasses of wine later, the conversation became more careless. One man joked about aging parents. Another complained about his father's refusal to leave his house. Ryan laughed. The older generation doesn't realize how expensive housing is now. Someone asked, "What do you do in those situations?" Ryan shrugged. You have to make difficult decisions. Emily looked down at her plate. I waited for her to defend me. She didn't. Then, Ryan said something that made the entire table laugh. At some point, parents have to stop treating their homes like museums. Everyone chuckled, everyone except me. I quietly set down my fork. Michael's photographs still hung in the hallway. His books still sat on shelves. His memories lived inside every room. Apparently, those memories were now considered clutter. One of Emily's coworkers asked me gently, "Do you still live nearby?" Before I could answer, Emily spoke. "Mom doesn't like change." I stared at her. She smiled politely. It's hard for her to move forward. Move forward? As if grieving your husband of 40 years was some kind of character flaw. As if loyalty had become weakness. After dinner, I escaped to the kitchen. I stood at the sink washing dishes that I had not even used. A few minutes later, Karen called. "How's the party?" I looked toward the dining room. "I think I've become furniture." Karen was quiet. "Do you want me to come over?" "No. You sound upset." I lowered my voice. "I don't think Emily sees me anymore." Karen answered softly. "Then you need to start seeing yourself." I didn't fully understand her words then. I would later. After I hung up, I walked toward the dining room to refill a water pitcher. Before entering, I heard my own name. Ryan was speaking. "The property alone is probably worth $900,000. Someone whistled. Emily quietly said, "Almost $1 million." Another voice asked, "What's the plan?" Ryan laughed. "Eventually, we'll renovate everything." My heart began beating faster. Someone asked, "What about your mother?" There was a pause, a very long pause. Then Emily said, "Mom doesn't need a house this size." My hands started shaking. Ryan added, "There are plenty of senior communities around here." The woman who had met me earlier asked carefully, "Has she agreed to that?" Ryan answered, "Not yet." The word "not yet" echoed inside my head. Not yet. As if my decision had already been made. As if I simply hadn't caught up. I walked back into the dining room. The conversation stopped. Everyone looked uncomfortable. Emily forced a smile. "Mom, do you need something?" I looked directly at her. "What exactly are you discussing?" Ryan answered immediately. "Future planning." "My future," Emily sighed. "Mom, please." "No, Emily, I'd like to know." The room became painfully quiet. Finally, Emily spoke. "You can't stay here forever?" The words felt like ice. One of the guests quietly looked away. Another pretended to check her phone. I asked the question that terrified me. "Why not?" Emily folded her arms. "Because someday this house will belong to me." I stared at my daughter. "No?" She looked surprised. "What?" "This house belongs to me." Ryan interrupted. "We're talking about the future." "No," I said quietly. "You're talking about my death." Nobody spoke. Emily's face hardened. "Mom, don't be dramatic." Dramatic. That word. Women our age hear it constantly. when we grieve too long, when we hurt too deeply, when we refuse to disappear quietly. I looked around the table. No one met my eyes. Not one person. I suddenly felt old. Not because of my age, because I had become the only person in the room who still remembered what the house actually represented. Sacrifice, marriage, family, love. Everyone else saw value, equity, investment, square footage. That night, after the guests left, I walked into the backyard. The maple trees moved gently in the wind. Michael had planted them with Emily. She had been 10 years old. I remembered her small hands helping him dig holes. I remembered her laughter. I remembered her saying, "This will always be our house." Tears filled my eyes, because somewhere between childhood and middle age, my daughter had forgotten what home meant. And for the first time, I realized something even more frightening. Ryan was no longer influencing Emily. Emily was beginning to believe him. When I returned inside, I found an envelope lying on the kitchen counter. My name was written on it. Inside was a brochure, a senior apartment complex. Several pages were highlighted. Monthly rent, medical services, activities, transportation. At the bottom, written in Emily's handwriting, were 4 words. Something to think about. I stood alone in my own kitchen, holding evidence that my daughter had already begun planning my exit. And deep inside, I realized the worst humiliation had not happened yet. It was still coming. The night my daughter finally asked me to leave my own house began with something very ordinary. Rain. Portland rain had always comforted me. Michael used to say the city sounded different when it rained. Softer, kinder. But that evening, the rain sounded cold. I returned home around 6 after spending several hours with Karen. I had delayed coming back because I no longer felt peaceful inside my own walls. The lights were on upstairs. Ryan's truck sat in the driveway. As I walked inside, I immediately sensed something was wrong. The living room looked different. Several boxes sat near the front door. My photographs had disappeared from the fireplace mantel. The small quilt Michael's mother had made was gone from the sofa. And standing beside the kitchen island were Emily and Ryan. Waiting. Ryan folded his arms. Emily wouldn't look at me. "What's going on?" I asked. Nobody answered immediately. I placed my purse on the table. My heart had already begun to race. Finally, Emily spoke. "Mom, we need to talk." Those 4 words. No child ever says them when good news is coming. I sat down. Ryan remained standing. Emily took a deep breath. "We've been thinking about what's best for everyone." I looked at her. "I don't understand." Ryan answered, "This arrangement isn't working." I felt the room begin to spin. "What arrangement?" Emily finally looked at me. "You living here." For several seconds, I honestly thought I had misunderstood. I actually smiled. "What?" Ryan stepped forward. "You'd be happier somewhere smaller." I stared at him. "This is my house." He sighed heavily. "We've been through this." "No," I said quietly. "Apparently, we haven't." Emily rubbed her forehead. "Mom, please don't make this harder." Harder. The word felt cruel. "Harder for who?" She looked exhausted. "For everyone." I could hear rain hitting the windows. I could hear the clock Michael had bought 20 years earlier, ticking above the fireplace. Everything seemed strangely clear. Ryan spoke again. We found a really nice apartment community. Emily slid a brochure across the table, the same brochure I had already found. I don't want an apartment. Mom, I don't want one. Ryan's voice became firmer. You can't stay here forever. I stood up. Get out. Both of them stared at me. This is my house. Ryan shook his head. Legally, things aren't that simple. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? Emily finally said the words I would never forget. Dad wanted this house to stay in the family. I am family. Her eyes filled with frustration. You know what I mean. No, Emily, I don't. Ryan stepped closer. You don't need 6 bedrooms. I don't need permission either. The room became silent. I looked at my daughter, my little girl, the child who once climbed into my bed during thunderstorms, the child Michael carried on his shoulders, the child I stayed awake with during fevers. And suddenly, she looked like a stranger. Emily lowered her eyes. Ryan and I need stability. So you throw me away? Her voice cracked. Mom, stop saying it like that. How should I say it? Nobody answered. I walked upstairs. I needed to breathe. I needed to think. But when I opened the door to the downstairs guest room where my belongings had been moved, my hands began to shake. My suitcases sat beside the bed, already packed. My clothes folded. My toiletries inside a bag. Even Michael's photographs had been boxed. I turned around slowly. Emily stood in the doorway. When did you do this? She started crying. This afternoon. You packed my things. We thought it would be easier. Easier. The entire evening had become a collection of terrible words. Practical. Future. Move on. Easier. I looked at the packed suitcases. Where was I supposed to go tonight? Emily swallowed. Karen said you could stay. My chest hurt. You already talked to Karen, she nodded. She was worried. I laughed. The sound surprised even me. My daughter had arranged my departure before speaking to me. She had packed my belongings. She had found me somewhere else to sleep. She had already decided. Ryan appeared behind her. We're not trying to hurt you. I looked directly at him. You already have. He remained silent. Downstairs, the clock struck 7. Rain continued outside, and for the first time since Michael died, I felt completely alone. I picked up one of the suitcases. Emily reached toward me. Mom. I stepped back. No! Tears rolled down her face. I didn't want it to happen this way. How did you want it to happen? She couldn't answer. Because there was no gentle way to remove your mother from her own home. I carried the suitcase downstairs. Ryan opened the front door. My second suitcase already sat on the porch. My umbrella, my coat, a small cardboard box. That was all. 40 years inside one house, reduced to luggage. The rain had become heavier. Emily stood beside the door, crying. Ryan looked uncomfortable, and I realized something terrible. Neither of them thought they were villains. They believed they were justified. That hurt more than anger, because it meant my daughter had convinced herself that I was the problem. As I reached for the cardboard box, several papers slipped onto the porch. Old documents, insurance forms, property records. Things I had packed years ago after Michael died. I bent down slowly. One folded envelope had Michael's handwriting. I placed it back inside the box without opening it. At that moment, Karen's car pulled into the driveway. She stepped out immediately. What the hell is going on? Nobody answered. Karen looked at my suitcases, then at Emily, then at Ryan. Her face changed. "You're throwing your mother out," Emily whispered. "It's complicated." "No," Karen said. "It's not." Ryan stepped forward. "This is a family matter." Karen looked directly at him. "Exactly." The rain soaked my coat. I suddenly felt very tired. I picked up the cardboard box. Inside were documents, photographs, and several files Michael had always kept. Karen took one suitcase. "I'll drive." I looked back one final time. Emily stood in the doorway, the same doorway where Michael and I had welcomed her home from the hospital after she was born. The same doorway where we had taken graduation photographs. The same doorway where Michael kissed me every morning before work. And now, my daughter stood there while I left. I waited. I truly waited for her to run toward me, to apologize, to stop me. Instead, she quietly said, "I'm sorry, Mom." I looked at her. "No." She frowned. "You're not." The door slowly closed behind her. And just like that, I was homeless. At Karen's house, I sat in her guest bedroom staring at the cardboard box. Rain tapped against the windows. Karen brought me tea. Neither of us spoke. Hours passed. Near midnight, unable to sleep, I opened the box. Old insurance papers, tax records, photographs, Michael's handwriting, and beneath everything else, a folded legal document. I recognized the paper immediately. Michael had shown it to me years ago, but I had never read it carefully. As I unfolded it, one single sentence caught my eye. A sentence written years before my husband died. And the moment I read those words, I stopped breathing. I read the sentence 3 times before I understood what it meant. The words were typed in small black letters near the bottom of a legal document dated almost 8 years earlier. "The surviving spouse shall retain exclusive lifetime occupancy rights to the property regardless of future inheritance claims or beneficiary interests." For several seconds, I simply stared. Rain tapped against Karen's windows. The bedside lamp cast a pale circle of light over the papers spread across the bed. I read the sentence again, and then again. Exclusive lifetime occupancy rights. My hands began to shake. Michael had never mentioned this, or perhaps he had, and I had been too overwhelmed during his illness to remember. I turned several pages. The document carried both our signatures. There were notarized stamps, legal language, trust documents. Attached to the final page was a yellow sticky note in Michael's handwriting. "If you ever need help, call Daniel. He'll know what to do." Daniel. Daniel Foster. The name sounded familiar. I closed my eyes. Then I remembered. Daniel had been Michael's attorney for years. The 2 men had played golf together. Daniel attended our anniversary party. He even spoke at Michael's funeral. Why had I never contacted him? Because after Michael died, I had avoided almost everything connected to legal matters. The paperwork hurt too much. The future hurt too much. And perhaps I simply trusted my daughter. That realization hurt most of all. Karen knocked softly before entering. She carried 2 cups of tea. "You should sleep." I looked up. "I don't think Emily can force me out." Karen sat beside me. "What do you mean?" I handed her the document. She adjusted her glasses. Several moments passed. Then she looked at me. "Alexa." My voice trembled. "What?" "You need to call a lawyer." The next morning, I barely slept. Sunlight entered through Karen's curtains, but I felt as if I had aged 10 years overnight. Karen cooked eggs and toast. I pushed food around my plate. You have to eat. I'm not hungry. She sat down across from me. Are you afraid? I nodded. Yes. Of Emily? I thought carefully. No. Then what? I looked down. I'm afraid Michael knew something I didn't. Karen remained quiet, and suddenly the thought became impossible to ignore. Why had Michael created these documents? Why had he written that note? Why had he specifically mentioned Daniel? The answers felt just beyond my reach. Around 10 o'clock, I found Daniel Foster's number online. My hand shook as I dialed. The receptionist answered. Law offices of Daniel Foster. My name is Alexa Nguyen. There was a brief silence. Mrs. Nguyen. Yes? Please hold. Less than a minute later, an older voice came on the line. Alexa! I nearly cried. Daniel! His voice softened. My God, it's been years. I'm sorry. No, don't apologize. I took a deep breath. I found some documents Michael left. He became quiet. Did something happen? I looked at Karen. Then I answered. Emily threw me out of my house. Several seconds passed. When Daniel finally spoke, his voice sounded different. Not surprised. Concerned. When can you come see me? Today. Good. His office sat downtown in an older brick building Michael and I had visited years ago. The waiting room smelled like coffee and old books. When Daniel entered, he looked older than I remembered. White hair, reading glasses. But his eyes immediately softened. He hugged me. Michael would kill me for saying this, but you haven't aged. I laughed for the first time in days. Then I cried. Daniel waited. He didn't interrupt. After several minutes, I told him everything. Emily moving in, Ryan, the bedroom, the party, the brochures, being forced out. Daniel listened quietly. When I finished, he opened the trust documents. He read every page carefully, several times. He leaned back in his chair. Michael was very thorough. I looked at him. What does it mean? It means your daughter cannot remove you. I closed my eyes. Relief flooded through me. But the word stopped me. But Daniel folded his hands. There's more. My stomach tightened. He opened another file drawer. Inside sat a thick folder. The front contained Michael's name. Your husband asked me to keep this. I stared at the folder. Why? Daniel removed his glasses. Because he worried. Worried about what? He hesitated. Then he answered carefully. He worried that after he died, people might pressure you. I felt cold. People... He looked directly at me. Anyone. I could barely breathe. Even Emily... Daniel was silent for several seconds. Finally, he said, Michael loved your daughter. I know. But he also knew human nature. I stared at the floor. Daniel continued. During the last year of his illness, Emily asked him several questions. My head lifted. What questions? The house. I blinked. The inheritance. I said nothing. The value of the property. The room became quiet. Daniel opened the file. Inside sat handwritten notes, meeting dates, trust documents, letters, and one envelope. Michael's handwriting covered the front. Only if necessary. My eyes filled with tears. Daniel did not open it. Instead, he pushed it gently toward me. Your husband specifically instructed me. What instructions? That if anyone ever tried to force you from your home, I was to help you protect yourself. My throat tightened. He knew, Daniel sighed. He worried. The difference mattered. Michael had not predicted the future, but he had prepared for it. That was the kind of man he had always been. When snow was forecast, he bought extra supplies. When Emily learned to drive, he purchased additional insurance. When I became ill, he organized medical files. And when he was dying, he apparently prepared to protect me, even from our own daughter. I wiped my eyes. What happens now? Daniel leaned forward. First, you do nothing. What? You don't call Emily. You don't confront Ryan. You don't tell them what you found. Why? Because I want to understand exactly what they've done. The words frightened me. What do you mean? He looked at me carefully. Did either of them ever ask you to sign anything? I thought. No. Any documents? No. Power of attorney? No. He nodded slowly. Good. I frowned. Why? Daniel tapped the papers. Because if they believe they own rights, they don't actually have, they may make mistakes. I didn't understand, but Daniel seemed deeply concerned. He stood and walked toward the window. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. Alexa, people who believe a house already belongs to them sometimes act very quickly. What does that mean? He turned back toward me. It means we need to find out whether your daughter and son-in-law have already begun trying to claim your property. I stared at him. No. His face remained serious. I hope not. As I left his office, the envelope Michael had written sat inside my purse. Daniel had told me not to open it yet. Not until we're sure, he said. Outside, rain had stopped. For the first time since being thrown out, I felt something returning. Not anger, not revenge, strength. But as I drove back toward Karen's house, my phone rang. Emily. I stared at the screen. The call ended. A text message appeared. Mom, a realtor is coming by the house tomorrow. Ryan and I need to discuss some things. I stopped breathing, because suddenly Daniel's warning no longer sounded hypothetical. They weren't waiting. They had already started. I did not answer Emily's text. For the first time in my life, I ignored my daughter. The silence felt unnatural. For 42 years, I had answered every call, every problem, every emergency. Whether she needed money for college textbooks, help with a broken appliance, or someone to watch her dog, I had always responded. But now, Daniel's words echoed in my mind. Do nothing. Say nothing. Let them show you what they're doing. That night, I barely slept. Karen's guest bedroom was comfortable, but it wasn't home. I missed the sound of my own refrigerator. I missed my garden outside the kitchen window. I even missed the old floorboards that creaked every morning when I walked downstairs. Most of all, I missed Michael. At 6 o'clock the following morning, I made coffee and sat alone at Karen's dining table. My phone buzzed. Another message from Emily. The realtor is coming at 11. We need to discuss the future. Not our future. Not your future. The future. As if my life had become a scheduling issue. Karen entered the kitchen wearing her robe. Any news? I handed her my phone. She read the message. Her eyes widened. A realtor. I nodded. They're actually doing it. Karen sat down heavily. Alexa, they can't sell your house. I know. But they think they can. That frightened me more than anything. Around 9 o'clock, I drove downtown to Daniel's office. He had asked me to bring every document I found in Michael's box. His secretary escorted me into a conference room. Several folders sat open on the table. Daniel entered carrying coffee. "Good morning." "It doesn't feel very good." He smiled gently. "No, probably not." I showed him Emily's message. He read it twice. "They've moved faster than I expected." "What does that mean?" He opened one of the files. "Michael and I spent several months setting up the trust." I sat quietly. He wanted one thing above everything else. "Me." Daniel nodded. "He wanted you protected." My throat tightened. "He never told me." "Because he didn't want you to worry." I looked down at my hands. That sounded exactly like Michael. Daniel opened another folder. Inside were copies of trust documents, property records, and legal correspondence. He pointed to one paragraph. "The trust gives you lifetime occupancy rights." "I understand that." "No, Alexa, I mean exclusive rights." I looked at him. "You cannot be removed. Even by Emily." "Even by Emily." He paused. "Even if you eventually leave the property temporarily." I blinked. "What?" "Spending a few nights away changes nothing." A weight lifted from my chest. For days, I had worried that leaving the house meant losing it. Apparently, it did not. Daniel continued. "The beneficiaries inherit only after your death." The words hurt, but they were also important. Emily had not inherited anything. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. Daniel studied my face. "You still love your daughter?" "Of course." "You don't want to hurt her?" "No." He nodded. "Michael knew that too." I looked up. "What do you mean?" Daniel reached into the folder and removed a handwritten letter. Michael's handwriting. I immediately recognized it. My breathing stopped. "This stays with me unless circumstances require otherwise." Daniel placed it on the table. "Your husband gave me this 3 months before he died." "Can I read it?" He hesitated. "Not yet." The answer surprised me. "Why?" "Because there may still be choices available." I frowned. "What choices?" "Emily may stop." I laughed quietly. "She threw me out." Daniel remained calm. "People do terrible things for money." I looked at him. "Do people come back from that?" He answered honestly. "Sometimes." We spent the next hour reviewing documents. The house title, the trust, tax records, insurance policies. Everything appeared exactly as Michael intended. And then Daniel opened one final file. His expression changed. "What is it?" He removed several pages. "Interesting." "What?" He looked at me carefully. "Did Ryan ever ask where you kept your documents?" "Yes." "Multiple times." I nodded. Daniel leaned back. "He may have been looking for something." "What?" "A power of attorney." I frowned. "I never signed one." "Good." His voice became very serious. "Never sign anything they give you." "I won't. And if either of them asks for paperwork, call me immediately." Fear returned. "Do you think Ryan would forge something?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked, "What kind of man is he?" I thought carefully. "He likes money." Daniel nodded. "That doesn't answer the question." I looked out the window. "I don't think I know him." The truth hurt. At noon, after leaving Daniel's office, I drove toward my neighborhood. I told myself I only wanted to see the house, nothing more. Karen had gone shopping. Daniel had returned to work. And suddenly, I needed to look at my home. When I turned onto my street, my hands tightened on the steering wheel. 2 unfamiliar cars sat in the driveway. A real estate sign leaned against the garage. My heart stopped. I parked half a block away. From inside my car, I watched strangers walk through my house. One man carried a camera. A woman held paperwork. Another person measured rooms. Ryan stood in the living room smiling. Emily walked beside him. She looked nervous, but she remained there. She participated. She opened doors. She answered questions. The front curtains had been removed. Several flower pots had disappeared. My porch looked empty, like nobody lived there. Like nobody had ever lived there. Tears blurred my vision. I remembered planting those flowers with Michael. I remembered painting the front door. I remembered carrying baby Emily through that entrance. And now strangers were discussing square footage, bedrooms, market value, potential upgrades. I sat in my car for nearly 30 minutes. At one point, Emily walked outside. She looked down the street. For a moment, I thought she saw me, but she didn't. She looked tired, older, and for the first time, I wondered if she was frightened. Because what if Ryan had promised her a future that never existed? What if she truly believed the house would become theirs? What if she had convinced herself that removing me was necessary? The questions didn't excuse her, but they complicated the pain. My phone rang. Daniel. Where are you? I hesitated. Outside my house. Go home. I needed to see. His voice softened. I know. I watched the strangers leave. Ryan shook hands with one man. Emily stood beside him. Then Ryan wrapped his arm around her shoulders. He looked proud, victorious, as if the house already belonged to him. Before hanging up, Daniel said something that made my stomach tighten. Alexa, I checked county records this morning. What does that mean? There hasn't been a sale. Good. But there was an information request filed last week. My fingers tightened around the phone. By who? He paused. Ryan Carter. My heart pounded. What kind of request? Daniel's voice became very quiet. He requested copies of your property documents. I looked at my house, at my daughter, at my son-in-law. And for the first time, I realized something even more frightening than being thrown out. Ryan had not just wanted my home. He had already begun looking for a way to take it. For the next 3 days, I lived in a strange space between grief and anger. Karen insisted I stay with her. Daniel insisted I remain patient. My heart insisted I drive back to my house every hour. I obeyed neither my heart nor my instincts. Instead, I waited. That was the hardest part. Mothers spend their entire lives fixing problems. We comfort crying children, solve emergencies, pay bills, make phone calls, and smooth over conflicts. Doing nothing felt impossible. But Daniel had been clear. If Ryan is moving this quickly, he'll eventually make a mistake. On Monday morning, my phone rang. Emily. I stared at the screen. This time I answered. Hello? There was silence, then her voice. Mom? She sounded tired. I waited. Where are you? I'm safe. Karen's? Yes. Another silence. We need to talk. I looked out Karen's kitchen window. About what? The house. There it was again. Not us, not family. The house. I spoke carefully. What about it? Emily sighed. Ryan and I are trying to make plans. My plans seem to have already been made. Mom, please. No, Emily. My voice surprised even me. It was calm, not angry, simply tired. "You packed my clothes," she began crying. "We didn't know what else to do." "Why?" She didn't answer. I heard Ryan speaking somewhere in the background. Emily lowered her voice. "Ryan thinks we need a fresh start." I closed my eyes. "And that requires removing me. You make it sound awful." It was awful. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she asked, "When are you coming home?" The question confused me. Home? To get your things? I almost laughed. "My things?" She sounded nervous now. "We've moved some furniture." "What furniture?" "The living room." My stomach tightened. "What did you do?" "We just rearranged things." "Emily." Her voice became smaller. "Ryan says the house needs updating." I suddenly understood. The realtor, the photographs, the measurements, the furniture. They were staging the house, even before speaking to me, even before understanding the legal situation. After hanging up, I immediately called Daniel. He listened quietly. Then he asked one question. "Did she mention selling?" "No." "Interesting." "What does that mean?" "It means they may know they don't actually have authority." That possibility had never occurred to me. Perhaps Ryan understood more than he admitted. Perhaps that was why he avoided direct conversations about ownership. Later that afternoon, Daniel called back. "I need you to come to my office." His voice sounded serious. When I arrived, several documents sat spread across his desk. One of them contained county records. Daniel pointed toward a page. "This was filed last week." I looked down. The name Ryan Carter appeared. "What is it?" "A request for ownership information." I frowned. "Is that illegal?" "No." He turned another page. "This is more concerning." A second request. Property valuation, mortgage status, public records. Ryan had requested everything available. I sat down slowly. He was investigating the house. Daniel nodded. "Long before you left." The room became quiet. I thought back. The questions, the paperwork, the conversations, the requests. Ryan had not arrived desperate. He had arrived prepared, and perhaps Emily had helped him. The thought hurt. Daniel continued. "I contacted a friend at a real estate office." I looked up. "What did you find?" He hesitated. "A realtor visited your house." "I know." "He wasn't there to discuss renovations." My chest tightened. "He prepared a market analysis." I stared at him. "For selling?" Daniel nodded. I couldn't speak, because suddenly everything became clear. The pressure, the brochures, the bedroom, the move, the realtor, the future. They had not simply wanted space, they wanted the house. That evening, Karen drove me through the neighborhood. We parked several houses away. The lights inside my home glowed warmly. Ryan stood in the kitchen. Emily sat at the table. From a distance, they looked like any married couple. Ordinary, normal. And that somehow made everything worse. Karen turned toward me. "What are you thinking?" I answered honestly. "I don't recognize my daughter." Karen was quiet. After a moment, she said, "Sometimes people disappear slowly." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" "They make small compromises." She looked toward the house. "One bad decision becomes another." I thought about Emily. Perhaps Ryan had introduced the idea. Perhaps financial pressure had made it easier. Perhaps fear had convinced her. But at some point, she had chosen. She had packed my clothes. She had watched me leave. No one had forced that decision. The next morning brought another surprise. Daniel called. "Can you come in?" When I arrived, a man sat in the conference room. Gray hair, suit, briefcase. Daniel introduced him. "This is Robert Jenkins." Robert shook my hand. "Pleasure to meet you." "Who is he?" Daniel sat down. "Robert works in title and property records." My stomach tightened. Robert opened his briefcase. "There may be a problem." I felt cold. "What kind of problem?" He slid a paper toward me. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then my eyes found my own name. Alexa Nguyen, a signature. My signature. Except it wasn't. I looked up. "What is this?" Robert answered carefully. "A power of attorney form." I stopped breathing. "I never signed this." Daniel nodded. "We know." My hands began shaking. The document appeared several months old. It gave authority over financial matters, property matters, legal matters. I stared at the signature. Someone had copied my handwriting. Poorly, but intentionally. I looked at Daniel. Where did this come from? His face had become very serious. It was never officially filed. "Then where?" Robert answered. "A realtor's preliminary file." The room became silent. My voice barely worked. "Who provided it?" Nobody answered immediately. Finally, Daniel said, "We don't know." I stared at the forged signature. Someone had attempted to create legal authority over my affairs. Someone had wanted access to my house, my money, my decisions. And suddenly, one terrible question entered my mind. Had Emily known? I looked at Daniel. His eyes met mine. He understood exactly what I was asking, but he answered very carefully. "We don't know yet." For several minutes, nobody spoke. Finally, I whispered, "Ryan." Daniel folded his hands. "Possibly." "But Emily," he interrupted gently. "We don't know." I looked down at the false signature. My name, my handwriting, my identity, stolen. And for the first time since being thrown out of my home, I felt something stronger than sadness. Fear. Because if Ryan was willing to forge my name, then perhaps losing my house had never been the real danger. Perhaps the real danger had only just begun. The moment I saw the forged power of attorney document, something inside me changed. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was clarity. Before that moment, I had still been trying to understand Emily, still trying to explain her actions as confusion pressure, misunderstanding. But forged signatures do not come from confusion. They come from intent. Daniel closed the file slowly. His voice was calm but firm. "This is serious, Alexa." I nodded, unable to speak. Robert Jenkins, the title specialist, adjusted his glasses. "If this document had been filed officially," he said, "it would have allowed someone else to act on your behalf in property decisions." I felt sick. "Sell my house?" "Potentially," Daniel answered. Silence filled the room. The truth was no longer abstract. It was standing in front of me, fully formed. Ryan had not only wanted access, he had been building a path, a legal path, a quiet one. I pressed my hands together to stop them from shaking. "Did Emily know?" I asked again. Daniel looked at me carefully. "We still don't have proof. But you think she might?" He didn't answer immediately. That silence said enough. Robert closed his briefcase. There's something else you should know. I looked at him. What now? He hesitated. This document wasn't just copied. My stomach tightened. It was submitted to a private real estate file system for pre-approval review. Daniel leaned forward immediately. Which means someone tried to validate it. My breath caught. Validate before a transaction. Robert said, agents sometimes check supporting documents to prepare listings. The word listing echoed in my mind. They were preparing to sell my house. Not discussing it, not considering it, preparing it. Daniel stood and walked to the window. When he spoke, his voice was lower. Alexa, we need to assume Ryan is actively trying to gain control of the property. I felt my hands go cold. And Emily? He turned back toward me. That is what we need to find out. The drive back to Karen's house felt longer than usual. Every red light felt heavier. Every intersection felt like a decision I couldn't undo. When I finally arrived, Karen was waiting on the porch. She immediately noticed my face. What happened? I handed her the documents. She read quickly, then stopped. Oh my God. I sat down on her steps. He tried to forge my signature. Karen looked up sharply. Ryan. I think so. She closed the folder slowly. Alexa, this is criminal. The word hit harder than expected. Criminal. Not just betrayal. Not just family conflict. Crime. That night, I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just sat in silence while Karen watched me carefully. At some point, she said softly, You need to think about protecting yourself. I already am protected, I replied. She shook her head. Not emotionally. The next morning, Daniel called early. I want you to stay somewhere secure for a few days. I already am. I mean away from your usual routine. I frowned. Why? Because Ryan has now shown intent. The word intent sounded like a warning siren. Intent to do what? Daniel paused. To gain control. A long silence followed. Then he added, and people who feel close to success sometimes accelerate their actions. My chest tightened. You think he'll try again? I think he may already be planning the next step. After hanging up, I sat at Karen's kitchen table for a long time. I thought about Emily as a child, her small hand in mine, her laughter in the backyard, her first school performance, her first heartbreak. And I thought about the woman she had become, a woman who had watched me pack my life into boxes, a woman who had stood in my living room while strangers measured my home, a woman who had said nothing. I whispered to myself, How did we get here? Karen placed a cup of tea in front of me. You didn't get here alone. That evening, something unexpected happened. A knock at the door. Karen and I exchanged a look. She opened it slowly. Emily stood there. No Ryan, no car visible. Just my daughter. Her eyes were red. Her hands were shaking slightly. Mom, she said softly, can we talk? Karen instinctively stepped aside. I didn't move. Emily entered slowly as if unsure whether she had permission. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, I didn't know about the documents. The words came too quickly, too rehearsed. I studied her face. Which documents? Her eyes flickered. The legal ones. I stayed silent. Emily swallowed. Ryan said everything was standard, that it was just paperwork for refinancing. Refinancing? I almost laughed, but I didn't. Instead, I asked quietly, Did you see the forged signature? Her expression changed immediately. confusion, then something else. Fear. What forged signature? My heart stopped. She didn't know, or she was pretending extremely well. I watched her closely. Emily, I said slowly, someone tried to take legal control of my property using my name. Her face went pale. I didn't, Mom. I swear I didn't know. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But Daniel's voice echoed in my mind. We still don't have proof. Emily stepped forward. Ryan handled everything. I just trusted him. The word trusted hung between us. I thought about all the years I had trusted her, without question, without doubt, without protection. Now I was the one asking for trust, and I didn't know if I deserved it anymore. Emily's voice broke. He said it was normal. He said you were planning to move anyway. I looked at her sharply. I was not planning to move. Tears filled her eyes. I know that now. Silence stretched between us. Then she whispered something that changed the air in the room. He told me you were declining. I frowned. What? Mentally, she said quickly. He said you were becoming forgetful, that you needed help managing things. My stomach dropped. Gaslighting, not physical force, not legal authority, something worse, rewriting perception. I stood slowly. Did you believe him? Emily shook her head violently. No, I don't know. I was overwhelmed. Everything was falling apart. Her voice cracked. I thought I was helping you. The words hit me harder than anger ever could. Because they revealed something deeper. She wasn't just taking. She was convinced she was saving. I turned away. I need time. Emily nodded quickly. Okay, I understand. But before she left, she hesitated. Mom. I didn't turn. Please be careful with Ryan. Her voice lowered. He's not who I thought he was. And then she was gone. I stood alone in the quiet kitchen long after she left. Karen finally spoke. Do you believe her? I didn't answer immediately, because the truth was complicated. Emily might not have forged anything, but she had stood beside it. And sometimes that difference is not enough. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, and for the first time, I understood something clearly. This was no longer just about a house. It was about truth, and who gets to define it. The morning after Emily left Karen's house, I woke up with a strange kind of silence inside me. Not peace, not calm. Something sharper. Awareness. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was watching. Daniel had told me something important. People make mistakes when they think they are close to winning. Now I understood what he meant. Ryan wasn't slowing down. He was accelerating. And Emily, whether willingly or not, was still inside that momentum. At 8:17 a.m., Daniel called. They've scheduled another showing, he said. My grip tightened on the phone. Another yes. Today. I closed my eyes. They didn't even wait for a response. That's the point, Daniel said calmly. They're acting as if ownership is already established. A pause. Then he added, I want you ready. For what? For confrontation. Those words stayed with me long after the call ended. Karen found me sitting at her kitchen table, staring at nothing. What did Daniel say? They're bringing more people to the house today. Her face hardened. Without your permission? Yes. She exhaled sharply. That man is unbelievable. I stood up. I'm going back. Karen immediately stepped forward. No, I'm not asking permission. This is exactly what Daniel told you not to do. I met her eyes. They are turning my home into something I don't recognize. A long silence. Then she softened slightly. Then you don't go alone. 2 hours later, Karen and I parked half a block from my house again. The same driveway. The same house. But it didn't feel like mine anymore. A sign had been placed more formally in the yard. Coming soon, Portland Real Estate. My stomach tightened. They had escalated. We walked slowly, and this time I didn't hesitate at the door. It was unlocked. Of course it was. Inside, voices echoed. A group of people stood in the living room. One man held a clipboard, another took photos. A woman inspected the kitchen counters. Ryan stood in the center like he belonged there. Emily was beside him. When she saw me, her face changed instantly. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I didn't answer her. I looked at Ryan. "What is this?" He smiled politely. "Just a preliminary showing. That's not what I asked." He glanced at Emily. "We thought it would be easier this way." I stepped further inside. "This is my house." A few people turned to look at me. Uncomfortable, confused. Ryan laughed lightly. "Alexa, we've talked about this." "No," I said firmly. "You've talked about this. I have not agreed to anything." Emily moved closer. "Mom, please don't do this right now." I turned to her. "You brought strangers into my home." "They're professionals," she said quickly. My voice lowered. "Without my consent." Silence. One of the realtors whispered something to another. Ryan stepped forward again. "We're just preparing options." "Options for who?" He hesitated. "For everyone?" I almost laughed. "Everyone?" My voice sharpened. "You mean you?" Emily flinched. "Mom, stop." I looked at her directly. "Did you know about this?" Her eyes flickered. That was enough. Ryan answered for her. "She's trying to help you." I turned to him. "You don't get to speak for her." He stiffened. For the first time, his mask slipped slightly. "Alexa, you are making this more difficult than it needs to be." There it was again. Difficult. Problematic. Emotional. Words used to shrink me. I stepped closer to him. "You forged my signature." The room went quiet. Even the realtors stopped moving. Ryan blinked. "I don't know what you're talking about." Daniel's voice echoed in my mind. "Never confront without evidence." I didn't respond further. Instead, I turned to Emily. "Do you know what he did?" Her lips parted slightly. "He said it was routine paperwork. Answer the question." Her voice broke. "No." Ryan's expression hardened instantly. "Emily." She looked at him, then back at me, and for a second something shifted. Not clarity, not courage, fear, but also doubt. I saw it, and so did Ryan. That was the problem. Doubt could break control. A realtor stepped forward awkwardly. "Maybe we should reschedule." Ryan cut him off sharply. "No, we're fine." Then he turned to me. "You are upset." "That's understandable." I stared at him. "You tried to take my house." He sighed. "I tried to secure a future for my family." "My family," I repeated slowly. He nodded. "Yes?" I laughed quietly. "Your family." Then I looked at Emily. "And I guess I'm not part of it anymore." Her eyes filled with tears. "That's not true." But she didn't move toward me. That told me everything. The realtor cleared his throat. We can come back another time. Ryan forced a smile. No need, but I could see it now. He was losing control of the room. And men like Ryan do not accept that easily. As the group slowly left, tension remained thick in the air. When the last person exited, only the three of us remained. The house felt different in silence, heavier. Ryan exhaled slowly. This is getting out of hand. I met his eyes. You made it out of hand. Emily spoke quietly. Mom, maybe we should just slow down. Ryan turned sharply toward her. No, we are not slowing down. The tone startled even her. I noticed it immediately. Control slipping, frustration rising. He walked toward the kitchen. We've already invested time and money into this. Invested, I repeated. Yes, he said firmly. Marketing, staging, legal prep. He stopped, a fraction of hesitation. Then planning. I nodded slowly. Planning without me. Emily looked between us. Please stop. But no one listened anymore. Ryan pulled out his phone. I think we need to resolve this properly. I frowned. What does that mean? He ignored me. Instead, he stepped into the hallway. Call Marcus, he said into the phone. My stomach tightened. Who is Marcus? Emily hesitated. Ryan didn't answer. That was worse. I turned toward Emily. Who is Marcus? She swallowed. I don't know. But her voice wasn't convincing. Not anymore. Ryan returned calmer now. Alexa, you are tired. This is emotional. We can revisit this later. I looked at him, and something inside me finally clicked. This was not confusion, not misunderstanding, not even conflict. This was a system, a plan, and I was the obstacle inside it. I stepped back slowly. You're not selling this house, I said quietly. Ryan's expression tightened. We will see. That single phrase changed everything, not because of what it meant, but because of what it revealed. Certainty. He believed he would succeed. No matter what I said, no matter what Emily felt, no matter what truth existed. As I turned to leave, Emily grabbed my arm. Mom, please. Just talk to us. I looked at her hand, then at her face, and for the first time I said something I had never said before. Let go. She did. Slowly. As I walked out of the house, I didn't look back, but I felt something behind me. Not just tension, not just betrayal, momentum. And I realized something terrifying. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It was a collision course, and someone was going to break first. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid anymore, but because I finally understood the shape of what I was facing. This was no longer a family conflict. It was a legal and emotional takeover attempt that had already moved too far to be dismissed as misunderstanding. Ryan had tried to create authority. Emily had unknowingly enabled him. And now both of them were operating under the belief that my home was negotiable. At 6:12 a.m., Daniel called. His voice was sharper than usual. Do not go near the house today. I sat up immediately. Why? There's movement. My stomach tightened. What kind of movement? A pause. Ryan has contacted another agent. My grip on the phone tightened. He's still pushing it forward. Yes, Daniel said. And that means he hasn't accepted resistance. I looked out Karen's window. The sky was gray again. Portland never seemed to run out of rain when my life was falling apart. What should I do? I asked. For the first time, Daniel didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "Now we stop reacting. We act." Those words changed something in me. Act. Not survive. Not endure. Act. 2 hours later, I was sitting in Daniel's office again. This time, the atmosphere was different. There were no scattered papers, no confusion, only structure. Daniel placed 3 folders in front of me. "Everything we need is here," he said. I looked at him. "For what?" "For control of the situation." I frowned. "I already told them no." Daniel nodded. "Yes, but they are behaving as if your no is irrelevant." He opened the first folder. "Ryan filed another request yesterday." My stomach dropped. What kind of request? Daniel turned the page toward me. A preliminary listing agreement. My house, my address, my property, my signature line. Blank, but prepared. My breath stopped. "He's preparing to list it," I whispered. "Attempting to," Daniel corrected. I looked up. "What's the difference?" Daniel leaned forward. "The difference is whether he believes he can succeed." That sentence stayed with me. Because belief was dangerous. Belief made people bold. Daniel continued. "I spoke with the realtor's office, and they've been given documents again." My stomach tightened. "The forged ones?" He nodded. "Yes." My voice dropped. "How?" Daniel hesitated. "That's what we need to confirm." A long silence followed. "Tethan," he added. "And there's something else." "The forged ones?" He nodded. "Yes." My voice dropped. "How?" Daniel hesitated. "That's what we need to confirm." A long silence followed. Then he added, "And there's something else." I looked at him. "This is important, Alexa." I braced myself. Emily was present during the last submission. The room tilted slightly. "What? She signed attendance confirmation forms." My heart tightened. "But that doesn't mean—" "It doesn't prove involvement," Daniel said quickly. "But it places her in proximity." I closed my eyes. Emily was there. Again. Not forging, not initiating, but present. Witnessing. Participating. Even if passively. That distinction mattered legally, and it mattered emotionally even more. Daniel leaned back. "Now we need clarity." "From her?" "Yes." I shook my head immediately. "I already asked her. She denies knowledge." Daniel studied me. "Then we escalate carefully." "Escalate." He nodded. "We bring formal notice." My chest tightened. "To who?" "To Ryan." A pause, and possibly Emily. The words hurt. "Is that necessary?" Daniel didn't soften. "It is if we want this to stop." That afternoon, I did something I had avoided since this began. I went back to the house. Not alone. Daniel came with me. When we arrived, the driveway was empty. For the first time in weeks, the house looked still. Almost peaceful. But I knew better now. Silence didn't mean safety. It meant preparation. Daniel rang the doorbell. No answer. We waited. Then I saw movement inside. A curtain shifted. "Emily." She opened the door slowly. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Mom." Her voice cracked slightly. Then she saw Daniel. Her expression changed instantly. Confusion, then alarm. "Why are you here?" Daniel spoke calmly. "We need to talk." Ryan appeared behind her within seconds. Instant tension. He looked at Daniel first, then at me. "This isn't necessary," Ryan said immediately. Daniel remained calm. Yes, it is. I stepped forward. Where were you going to list my house? Ryan exhaled. Alexa, we're not doing anything illegal. That wasn't my question. Emily looked between us. What is going on? I turned to her. Did you know about a listing agreement? Her face went pale. 2 saw documents. Ryan cut in sharply. They were drafts. Daniel spoke immediately. Drafts submitted to an agent are not private thoughts, they are intent. Silence. Emily looked confused. Ryan told me it was just planning. Daniel turned slightly toward her. Planning does not include forged documents. That word hit the room like a stone. Emily froze. What? I watched her carefully. Ryan's jaw tightened. Careful, he said. Daniel didn't flinch. There is a falsified signature connected to your mother's identity. Emily stepped back slightly. That's not possible. I spoke quietly. It is. Her eyes filled instantly. I didn't do that. I know, I said. She looked at me desperately. I didn't know anything about that. Ryan stepped forward. This is getting out of hand. Daniel turned to him. No. It's being clarified. The air in the room shifted. For the first time, Ryan didn't look confident. He looked cornered. Daniel placed a document on the table. A formal notice, he said. Ryan glanced at it. What is this? A legal boundary statement, Daniel replied. You are not authorized to market, list, or negotiate the sale of this property. Emily looked shocked. Sale? Her voice rose slightly. Mom, I thought this was never about selling. I looked at her directly. It was always about selling. She shook her head. No, Ryan said. She stopped mid-sentence. Because Ryan wasn't speaking anymore. He was watching, carefully, calculating. I realized something in that moment. Ryan wasn't reacting like someone surprised. He was reacting like someone adjusting strategy. That terrified me more than anything. Daniel continued. Any further attempts will result in formal legal action. Ryan finally spoke. This is unnecessary escalation. Daniel answered calmly. No. It is containment. A long silence followed. Then Emily whispered, Mom, is this true? I looked at her, and for the first time, I saw something different in her eyes. Not manipulation, not control, confusion, real confusion. I softened slightly. I didn't want any of this. Her voice broke. I believed him. I nodded slowly. I know. Ryan suddenly spoke again. This conversation is over. Daniel turned toward him. No, it is not. Ryan's expression hardened. You're threatening us, no, Daniel said. I am protecting her. The word her hung in the air. Not Emily, not Ryan, me. For the first time, the roles were clearly defined. Ryan stepped closer. Alexa, you're being influenced. I looked at him. No, I said quietly. I'm being informed. A flicker of anger crossed his face, but something else followed it. Uncertainty, because the structure he had built was cracking, and he knew it. Emily suddenly spoke. Stop! Everyone turned. Her voice was shaking. Just stop. Silence. She looked at me. Mom, I need to understand what's real. I nodded slowly. That's all I've ever wanted. She looked at Ryan, then back at the table, and for the first time since this began, she didn't defend him immediately. That was the beginning of the break. Not legal, not physical, emotional. And in conflicts like this, that is always the most dangerous shift. Because once belief breaks, everything else follows. After Daniel's formal notice was delivered, everything went quiet for exactly 2 days. Not peaceful quiet, suspicious quiet. The kind of silence that comes right before something breaks. Ryan did not call. Emily did not text. No realtor appeared. No documents were sent. It felt like the house itself was holding its breath. Daniel warned me not to misinterpret it. "This is not retreat," he said. "This is recalibration." I didn't like that word. Recalibration suggested planning, adjustment, strategy. On the third morning, Emily showed up alone again. No Ryan, no car idling outside. Just her. She looked thinner than before, tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. When I opened the door, she didn't speak immediately. She just stood there, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to enter her own childhood home. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside. She walked inside slowly, looking around, like she hadn't seen the house in years, even though it had only been days. The living room was unchanged, but everything felt different now, stripped of illusion. Emily stopped near the staircase. "I didn't know about the legal notice," she said. I watched her carefully. "I know," she swallowed. "I asked Ryan about it, and he said it was intimidation." I didn't respond. She looked at me. "Is it?" I shook my head. "No." Silence stretched between us. Then she added softly, "He's angry." I felt something tighten inside me. That's not my concern anymore. Her eyes widened slightly. "Mom?" I held her gaze. "I didn't choose this situation, Emily. I reacted to it." Her voice broke. "I feel like I don't understand what's real anymore." That honesty surprised me. For the first time, she didn't sound like someone defending a position. She sounded lost. I softened slightly. "What happened at the showing?" I asked. Her shoulders dropped. "After you left, Ryan was furious." I stayed silent. "He said you were trying to sabotage everything." I exhaled slowly. "That's not true." "I know," she said quickly. "I told him that." That detail mattered. I watched her carefully. "And what did he say?" Emily hesitated. "He said you were being influenced." My stomach tightened. "By Daniel." She nodded. I almost laughed. Instead, I said quietly, "That man has known your father longer than you've been alive." Emily looked down. "I told him that too." Another pause. Then she added, "He didn't like it." That was an understatement. I could imagine Ryan's reaction perfectly. Control slipping, narrative collapsing, pressure rising. Emily sat down on this bottom step. "I don't know what I'm supposed to believe anymore," she whispered. For a moment, I didn't speak, because there was something fragile in her voice. Not manipulation, not strategy, collapse. Finally, I sat across from her. "I can't tell you what to believe," I said, "but I can tell you what I know." She looked up. "Tell me." So I did. I told her about the trust, about the lifetime occupancy rights, about Daniel, about the forged document, about the realtor filings. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't accuse. I just laid out facts. By the time I finished, her hands were trembling. "He never told me any of that," she whispered. "I believe you." She looked at me sharply. "You do?" "Yes, because I did." Even now, I could separate Ryan's manipulation from Emily's confusion. But that didn't remove consequences. Emily stood up suddenly. "I need to talk to him." Emily. No, she said firmly. I need to understand what he's done. I stood as well. Be careful. She looked at me. I don't even know what that means anymore. Then she left. That was the first crack. Not in the house, not in the legal situation, but in the alignment between them. And cracks like that always widen. That evening, Daniel called again. His tone changed immediately when I told him Emily had come alone. That's important, he said. What does it mean? It means she's separating emotionally. From Ryan. Yes. I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in weeks. Hope. But Daniel's next words grounded me immediately. Don't assume separation equals resolution. I frowned. What do you mean? People don't exit manipulation cleanly. His voice lowered. Sometimes they swing between sides before deciding where they stand. That sentence stayed with me long after the call ended. The following morning, Ryan appeared at the house. Not politely, not quietly. He arrived like someone reclaiming territory. I saw his truck before I saw him. He walked up the driveway without hesitation and knocked hard. I opened the door. He didn't wait for invitation. He stepped inside. We need to talk, he said immediately. I didn't move. You can talk from there. His jaw tightened. Where is Emily? Not here. His eyes narrowed. I know she came. I said nothing. He took a breath. This is getting out of control. I almost laughed. You started this. He stepped closer. No, he said firmly. You did. That surprised me. The confidence. The rewrite. I studied him. You forged my signature? I said calmly. He didn't react immediately. Then he said, I didn't forge anything. I nodded slowly. That's a lie. His expression hardened. You're being manipulated by that lawyer. There it was again. Daniel. The obstacle. The threat. I stayed calm. You're not going to intimidate me. He leaned in slightly. I'm trying to protect my wife. I looked at him directly. No, I said quietly. You're trying to protect your plan. A silence followed. Heavy. Controlled. Then he changed tactics. Emily is emotional right now. She's thinking clearly, I said. He shook his head. She's confused. I almost pitied him in that moment because he truly believed he was still in control of the narrative. But I had learned something important. Narratives collapse when exposed to repetition of truth. And I had started repeating it. He stepped back slightly. You don't understand what's happening here, he said. I understand enough. He exhaled sharply. This house is leverage, that word, leverage. Everything finally became clear. To him, the house was not home, not memory, not history. It was asset positioning. He continued, if you just cooperate. I will not cooperate with fraud. His eyes flashed. That's a strong accusation. It's an accurate one. Silence. Then he said something quieter. Emily will come around. I shook my head. No, not if she understands what you've done. His expression shifted slightly. And for the first time, I saw it. Fear. Not of me, not of Daniel, of exposure. He stepped toward the door. This isn't over. I nodded. No, I said, it isn't. When he left, I didn't feel relief. I felt something more stable. Resolution. Because the situation was no longer abstract. It had structure, sides, evidence, and now fracture lines. And once fracture lines appear, collapse becomes only a matter of timing. After Ryan left my house that day, something fundamental shifted. Not in him, not in Emily, in me. For weeks, I had been reacting, absorbing shocks, responding to moves, trying to understand intentions. But now I saw the structure clearly. Ryan wasn't improvising anymore. He was executing, and Emily was still inside the orbit of that execution. Daniel called that evening. His tone was different the moment I answered. "We need to move faster," he said. My stomach tightened. "What happened?" "There's been another filing attempt." I sat down immediately. "By who?" A pause. "Ryan." My grip tightened on the phone. What did he file? A revised ownership clarification request? I closed my eyes. "He's still pushing that angle." "Yes," Daniel said. "But this time, it's more aggressive. Meaning Hez trying to establish implied authority through your absence." "He's still pushing that angle." "Yes," Daniel said. "But this time it's more aggressive. Meaning he's trying to establish implied authority through your absence." That sentence hit hard. My absence, even though I had been forced out, even though I had not left voluntarily. Legally, absence could be misinterpreted if not properly challenged. Daniel continued. "I need you to understand something, Alexa." I listened carefully. People like Ryan don't stop when they're challenged. Then what do? They escalate until they are stopped externally. I felt a chill. Externally? Court, legal enforcement, documentation, intervention. I sat in silence. I don't want this to go that far. "I know," Daniel said softly, "but you may not control that anymore." After the call, I sat alone in Karen's kitchen for a long time. Karen placed a hand on my shoulder. "You look like you've been somewhere far away." "I have." She didn't ask further. That was what I needed. Later that night, I made a decision. Not emotional, not reactive, intentional. I would go back to the house again, but not to confront, not to argue, to observe. I needed to see what Ryan was doing when he thought I wasn't watching. The next morning, I parked 2 blocks away. The house looked normal from a distance. Too normal. Emily's car was in the driveway, Ryan's truck beside it, lights on inside. Life continuing, as if I had never been removed. I stayed in the car for nearly 20 minutes before walking. Every step felt heavier than the last. When I reached the front door, I didn't knock immediately. I listened. Voices inside. Ryan speaking. Calm. Controlled. Emily responding occasionally. Uncertain. I pushed the door open. It was unlocked again. Inside, I stopped. The living room had changed. Not slightly. Significantly. Furniture rearranged. Walls cleared. Decor removed. Even photographs were gone. My breath caught. Ryan appeared from the hallway. He didn't look surprised. "Alexa," he said evenly, "this isn't a good time." I looked around. "What have you done to my house?" Emily appeared behind him. Her face went pale when she saw me. "Mom!" I held up my hand. "Don't." Ryan stepped forward slightly. "We are preparing the property." For what? He exhaled. "For inspection readiness." The words were precise. Deliberate. I turned slowly. You're staging it. He didn't deny it. That was the answer. Emily spoke quickly. Mom, it's just organization. Nothing is being sold. I looked at her, but I didn't respond immediately because I noticed something in her voice. Less certainty, more hesitation. Ryan moved closer. We're trying to reduce complications. Complications, I repeated. Yes. I looked directly at him. I am not a complication. A brief pause. Then he said, in legal terms, uncertainty is a complication. That was the first time I realized something important. He wasn't speaking emotionally anymore. He was speaking strategically. I turned to Emily. Did you agree to this? She hesitated. I thought it was temporary. Ryan answered immediately. It is, but I noticed something subtle. He didn't look at her when he said it. That detail mattered. I stepped further into the room. This is my home. Ryan sighed. We've established occupancy is not ownership in practical terms. I stared at him. Practical terms? Yes. I shook my head slowly. You're rewriting reality. Emily looked between us. Please stop arguing. But neither of us listened, because the center of control in the room had already shifted, and Ryan knew it. He picked up a folder from the table. Here, he said, placing it down. I didn't touch it. What is that preliminary valuation summary? My stomach tightened. You had an appraisal done. Emily looked shocked. You didn't tell me that. Ryan didn't respond immediately. Then, it's standard. I looked at him. No, it's not. Silence. He studied me carefully, then said something quieter. You're resisting something that is already in motion. That sentence landed differently, because it revealed belief again. He genuinely thought momentum was on his side, and people who believe momentum is theirs tend to take risks. I looked at Emily again. Do you understand what he's doing? Her eyes filled slightly. I don't know anymore. That was the truth. Not denial, not defense, confusion. I softened slightly. Then stop letting him do it. Ryan interrupted immediately. She's not being manipulated. I turned sharply. That is exactly what she is. His jaw tightened. You're isolating her. I almost laughed. You moved into my house. That silenced him briefly. Then he said, this conversation is over. But I didn't move, because I realized something critical. He was trying to regain control of pacing. Speed. Direction. And I had just disrupted it. I looked at Emily. Come outside with me. She hesitated. Ryan spoke immediately. No. I ignored him. Emily? She looked torn. Between two systems, two narratives, two versions of reality. Finally, she stepped forward slightly. I just need a minute, she said quietly. Ryan's expression changed. Not anger. Calculation. I saw it clearly now. This was no longer about persuasion. It was about containment. As Emily followed me outside, the air felt colder than before. We stood near the driveway. She spoke first. I didn't know about the appraisal. I nodded. I believe you. She looked relieved for a moment, then asked, What is happening, Mom? I answered honestly. I think he's preparing to take the house. Her eyes widened. That's impossible. No, I said quietly. It's attempted. She looked down. I don't know what to do. For the first time, I saw something real in her. Not alignment, not loyalty, disorientation. And that mattered, because disorientation is the first step out of control. Behind us, the front door opened. Ryan stood watching, not interrupting, just observing, and I realized something chilling. He wasn't worried about me. He was watching Emily, because her doubt was now the variable he could not predict, and that made her the most important person in the equation. Not me. Not Daniel. Her. And in that moment, I understood the real battle was no longer over the house. It was over her belief, and whichever side she settled on next would determine everything that followed. The night after I walked out of my house with Daniel and saw Emily standing between two versions of truth, I didn't feel relief. I felt suspended, like something had not ended but had paused just before impact. Daniel had warned me about this stage. The hardest part, he said, is when the truth starts separating people who once shared the same belief system. Now I understood what he meant, because Emily was no longer fully aligned with Ryan, but she was not yet free of him either. And in that space between influence and independence, anything could still happen. 2 days passed without contact. Then 3. No calls from Emily. No messages from Ryan. No legal updates. No realtor activity. Even Daniel found it unusual. "This is not resolution," he said. "It's containment." I didn't like that word. Containment suggested pressure building somewhere out of sight. On the 4th morning, Emily appeared at Karen's house again. This time, she didn't knock immediately. She stood on the porch for nearly a minute before entering. When she finally walked in, I saw it instantly. Something had changed. Not in her appearance, in her expression. Less confusion, more decision. She sat down slowly across from me. "I left him," she said. The sentence didn't come with drama. No tears, no build-up, just fact. I didn't respond immediately, because I needed to understand if I had heard correctly. "You left Ryan?" I asked quietly. She nodded. "Yes." Karen, standing near the kitchen counter, stopped moving. Emily continued. "After you left the house that day, I couldn't stop thinking." She swallowed. "About everything." Her hands trembled slightly. I went back through messages, emails, documents he showed me. She looked up at me. "And nothing matched what you told me." I stayed silent, so I asked him directly. Her voice tightened, and he got angry. That part didn't surprise me. Emily's eyes filled slightly. "He said I was choosing you over him." She laughed softly, but it broke halfway. I realized then that wasn't even the question. I leaned forward slightly. "What was—" Her voice dropped. "Whether I trusted reality." The room became quiet. She continued. "I asked him about the forged document. That caught my attention immediately. And he denied it again." She shook her head slowly. But this time, I didn't believe him. Something inside me loosened. Not fully, but enough. Emily looked down at her hands. "I stayed in a hotel for 2 nights. Then she looked at me. "I needed to be away from both of you." That sentence mattered, because it showed separation from both narratives. Not alignment, distance. "I called a lawyer," she added. I glanced at Daniel immediately in my mind. She noticed my reaction. "Not him," she said quickly. "A neutral one. That was important too." She continued. "He confirmed there were filings I never saw, requests I never signed." Her voice tightened, and he told me something I didn't expect. I waited. That someone had been building a case around perceived authority over your property. My stomach tightened slightly. Emily looked at me directly. "Mom, I didn't know the extent of it." I nodded slowly. "I believe you," She blinked. You do? Yes, because I did. Now. But belief didn't erase consequences. Emily exhaled shakily. I ended it. A pause. He didn't take it well. I could imagine. But I'm done, she said firmly. I'm not part of it anymore. Silence followed. Karen finally spoke softly. Where are you staying, friends? Emily replied. For now. She hesitated. I needed to tell you something else. My attention sharpened. Ryan contacted me this morning. My body tensed. What did he say? Emily's voice dropped. He said this isn't over. The air in the room shifted. Karen straightened slightly. Emily continued. He said the house is still part of the plan. I frowned. What plan? She shook her head. I don't know. Then she added something that made my chest tighten. But he said something about leverage. That word again. Ryan's world reduced everything to leverage. World reduced everything to leverage. People. Relationships. Homes. I stood slowly. Did he threaten you? Emily hesitated. No. Not directly. A pause. But he implied that I would regret stepping away. Relationships. Homes. I stood slowly. Did he threaten you? Emily? Hesitated. No, not directly. A pause. But he implied that I would regret stepping away. That was enough. I turned to Daniel later that afternoon. When I told him everything, he didn't look surprised. That confirms it, he said. What? That Ryan is still operating under assumption of control. I frowned. But Emily left. That doesn't matter to someone like him, Daniel said. He will attempt to reassert control regardless. I felt a chill. How Daniel leaned forward. Through documentation, or pressure, or third parties. My stomach tightened. What should I do? Daniel paused, then said something I didn't expect. Nothing alone. That evening, Emily returned with a small folder. I brought everything I have, she said. Inside were emails, screenshots, copies of messages, financial discussions, property-related references, not conclusive on their own. But together, a pattern emerged. Daniel reviewed them carefully the next morning. His expression became more serious with each page. This is enough to establish intent, he said finally. I looked at him. Intent for what? To exert control over property assets without proper authorization. He closed the folder. Legally, this is now shifting. I felt tension rise. Shifting how? From private dispute to formal investigation, if continued. The word investigation made the room feel colder. Daniel looked at me carefully. There is something you need to prepare for. What Ryan will not stop quietly. I already knew that, but hearing it confirmed changed something. That evening, I stood alone in Karen's backyard. The air was still. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about being removed from my home. I was thinking about reclaiming it. Not emotionally, not symbolically, legally. And for the first time since this began, I understood something fundamental. This was no longer a story about losing a house. It was about exposing the truth behind who tried to take it. And now that truth had started to surface, there was no going back to silence.